IELTS Listening. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to section 1. Section 1. You will hear a woman asking an agent about rented accommodation. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Good morning. How can I help you?
I'm interested in renting somewhere to live in town and was wondering what you had available.
Excellent. I'll just need to find out a bit more about what you're looking for, and then we can see what we've got. So, your name is?
Anna Black.
Good, got that.
The woman's name is Anna Black, so Anna Black has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Good morning. How can I help you?
I'm interested in renting somewhere to live in town and was wondering what you had available.
Excellent. I'll just need to find out a bit more about what you're looking for, and then we can see what we've got. So, your name is?
Anna Black.
Good, got that. And what sort of accommodation are you looking for, ideally?
Well, I don't know if this is going to be possible, but ideally a house. I live in a flat at the moment and I've got really noisy neighbours. That's the reason I want to move.
Oh dear. And I'm afraid most of the accommodation for rent in the city centre is flats. Would you be prepared to look elsewhere? There are a lot of nice properties in the southeast.
Oh yes, that would be really convenient for me. Quite a few of my friends are there and it would be really close to my work.
And there's more chance of finding what you're after there. I take it you'd be looking for a furnished place, would you?
Yes, and I know it's not always included, but I'd like to have a washing machine. I hate going to laundrettes, and if I'm a bit further out of the city, it might be a problem to find one.
I'll see what I can do. Now, how long would you need the property for, bearing in mind that the minimum is 6 months?
1 year. I don't want to chop and change too often, and that'd give me the chance to see how things work out. And then I could reassess the situation after that.
And when would you like to move in?
I've got to be out of my present place by the 30th of April. Then I'm going to visit my parents for a couple of weeks, so let's say 15th of May.
And what's your current address? I'd better make a note of that for our files, and I'll put that you're there only until the end of April.
56 Stone Street.
And is there a phone number I can get you on?
Yes. The best one to use is my mobile, and that's 07942 326 584.
Now, of course, we'll need a reference before we're able to proceed with any contract. Who would be able to supply you with a reference?
I'm pretty sure my employer will do that for me. I don't really know my doctor or anyone like that here.
Good. Now, let's see what we've got that might suit you. Oh, first, how much are you looking to pay?
I'm paying £650 a month at the moment. and the most I can go to is £675. I really can't go over that.
That shouldn't be any problem. It's a realistic figure. And can I ask what it is you do for a living?
Since I came here, I've been working for various bodies within the city as a translator. You know, for the police and the hospital.
OK, good.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Now, if we do find something, we'll need to check your ID, so we'll need to see your passport. And, of course, to do the credit check, we'll need to see a bank statement in order to complete all the paperwork.
No problem. I can bring those in tomorrow.
Good. Now, we've got a small house to rent that I think might be just what you're looking for. 33 Ainsworth Street. That's AINSWORTH Street. Here are the details.
This looks great. Right size, right price?
Well, I could arrange for you to view it on Saturday around 4 p.m. if that's convenient.
Sounds good. I can't see any mention of a telephone in the details, though. I'd need that.
I'll look into that, and I can double-check when we're at the property.
And, sorry, there's another thing. Do you happen to know if there's a bus stop reasonably close to the house so that I can get around easily?
Again, if I can't find out before Saturday, I'll check it out when we're there.
OK. So I'll drop by tomorrow with those papers you need and then see you at the property Saturday at 4 p.m.
Excellent.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 2. You will hear a traffic police officer talking to a group of listeners about driving licence application and traffic conditions in the UK. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15. Hello, I'm Edward, and I'm here to tell you about road conditions in various areas of the UK. I'm also going to tell you about driver's licenses in the UK. If you have never had a driver's licence, or you have one from another country and you want to get a UK licence, you must be a UK resident. You will need to show a medical report when your UK licence needs to be renewed. If you are trying to translate your original foreign driving licence to apply for a UK licence, which is a must if you want to be able to drive here, you will need to visit an official agency. These are scattered throughout the London area and are well equipped to assist you with any questions you might have, and any services they offer are included in your licence fee. If you already have a translated licence but need some personal information updating, you do not need to pay for the update. They'll do it for free. When you are getting a new driving licence, you may need to have a new photo taken, as some photos are rejected. It's actually okay if your photo is too small, since we can get it enlarged with our printer. The majority of rejected photos are the ones that were taken with a cream backdrop instead of a monotone grey background. We've now found that photos with the latter allow us to identify the license holder much more easily. If you were wearing glasses on the previous photo, you don't need to worry about it, since it is still allowed. If you are not sure whether your previous license is still valid, then the license checking service is for you. The procedures are quite clear, and you just have to follow them. Ideally, I would like to see the process going faster, since it can take hours to finish. From my standpoint, it will help if all the applicants bring the necessary identification with them. Then all they have to do is just fill in the forms accordingly, step by step. I'm often asked whether I have a personal recommendation about the fastest or cheapest place to get all this done. But I think it really depends on where you are. They can all get busy at some point, and when it is quiet at one branch, it may be busy in another. So take your pick. All I would say is that there is absolutely no difference in price. It's a standard fee. The only advice I would give is that the quickest way to complete an application is to fill out the form on the internet and then bring a print copy with you to the agency location of your choice. Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 16 to 20. Next, people frequently ask me what I think of the road conditions in some of our cities. London is obviously the biggest and busiest, and there are lots of parking restrictions, one-way systems, and so on. But on the whole, I find the traffic signs are very clear. In Edinburgh, most people use digital maps to get to know local traffic and road conditions, which can be estimated through different traffic flow lines. It is a city of lights, traffic lights, but they're extremely efficient as they're timed perfectly to get the traffic flowing smoothly. That's important because pedestrian areas and crossings are always packed with people on foot, which needs strong regulation. The city of Cardiff has tackled traffic flow in a different way. It recently completed a road expansion scheme, and the extra lanes of the dual carriageway are easing congestion. It's a similar story in Manchester. Instead of going through the town centre, most vehicles choose ring roads so as to avoid the downtown congestion. It can still happen though, so there's a possibility that the city will introduce checkpoints where the police can intervene to direct traffic at peak periods. And finally, they say all roads lead to Rome, and you could say that about Oxford. I like the many options for getting in and out of the city because drivers can always find alternative routes. The other cities in the UK are... That is the end of part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 2.
Section 3. You will hear a student called Greg talking to his student about the study of the wind farm in Australia. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
OK, Greg. So I finally managed to read the article you submitted, the one about the study of the wind farm in Australia.
You did? Great! What did you think of it?
Yeah, I was a little confused at first because of the background information you failed to present on the paper. I mean, it's kind of important for you to give some general knowledge before you start actually writing on the main theme.
Oh, I was thinking of doing that during the presentation session. But now that you have mentioned it, I could add it to the beginning of the essay. I've done some research on that, to think about the different ways that people use wind. Wind is one of our cleanest and richest sources of power, as well as one of the oldest. Windmills began to be used in ancient Iran back in 7th century BC. They were first introduced to Europe during the 1100s, when armies returned from the Middle East with knowledge of using wind power. For many centuries, people used windmills to grind wheat into flour or pump water from deep underneath the ground. During the 1970s, people started becoming concerned about the pollution that is created when coal and gas are burned to produce electricity. People also realized that the supply of coal and gas would not last forever. Then, wind was rediscovered and carried out into research for the first time.
Greg, why don't you just put all that information together and present that in the introduction part of your essay?
Okay, I'll do that. What also intrigued me was that there were disadvantages about a wind farm. You see, all the conventional green scenarios for reducing carbon emissions include a dramatic upscaling in renewable power generated by wind, both on and offshore. However, the environmental impacts of this large-scale industrial deployment, both of turbines and power lines, frequently in relatively natural areas, are often neglected by climate campaigners. For example, wind turbines have the reputation of generating noise as well as electricity. So as more electricity is produced, they can be really noisy. Another thing is that some new turbine blades kill a worrying number of birds, especially large birds like raptors.
But there must be a bright side, right?
Yeah, of course. According to figures pulled together by consultants of the Intelligent Energy Systems using data from the Australian market operator, wind energy accounted for 50% of demand in the state. That's half of the power source. Besides, this one unexpected outcome really attracts lots of visitors and helps the local tourism.
That's good to hear.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now, listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Oh, how about the structure?
Offshore wind farms consist of a number of connected elements. These include the turbines, foundations, array cables, offshore substation, export cable, and onshore substation and infrastructure. Just a single one of these giant wind turbine blades, produced by manufacturer Siemens, is almost as big as the Airbus A380, the world's largest plane. That's made in Europe.
Impressive.
Actually, at first, there were protests among residents who claimed themselves to be victims of land loss and noise. Then, policies came out really quick, and then they could get allowance from the government. From then on, things went smoothly.
What would happen in extreme weather conditions? I mean, it could be dangerous if hurricanes occur.
A motorized operating mechanism enables the device to be switched back on remotely. All versions feature the modular design and share the same complete range of standard accessories, thanks to its very extensive operating temperature range of -25 to 70 Celsius and its strong temperature range of -40 to 70 Celsius. It is ideally suited for use in wind turbines under extreme climatic conditions, though they do have an option to lower the speed of it.
Wonderful. Then, what were the fans, or turbine blades, made of? Is it a special kind of metal?
No, they were too heavy. Wind turbine blades must be strong, light, and capable of operating for decades without much, if any, maintenance. Fiberglass is one of the main components of many large-scale wind turbine blades. The material is used because it is lightweight, easily shaped, and not too expensive. Another material used to make longer turbine blades is timber. This material is too expensive to use amongst all the blades, but on the longer blades, it's used to help reinforce them because it is stiff and light.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Part 4. You will hear part of a presentation about the early history of salt. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In my presentation, I'm going to talk about salt. In modern times, when we talk about salt, people may associate it with high blood pressure or increased heart risk, and many health experts warn that we should use less salt in our meals and dishes. However, we should not ignore its importance in our cuisine and even in early human history. Salt is one of the oldest, most ubiquitous food seasonings. The taste of salt is one of the basic human tastes. More importantly, salt plays an indispensable role in the health of human beings. For example, it regulates the body's acid-base balance. Because of its importance to survival, salt has often been considered a valuable commodity during human history. This can be tracked all the way back to ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, and ancient Rome, when salt was highly valued and used as a method of trade and currency. In ancient Rome, the busiest road leading to the city was the Via Salaria, which means the salt route in English. A soldier's pay, which partly consisted of salt, was known as salarium argentum in Latin, from which we derived the English word salary. A soldier's salary was cut if he was not worth his salt, an expression still used today. In fact, salt was not only the first condiment discovered, but also the first preservative. We know today that food goes bad because microorganisms in the food multiply in abundance, and a high salt environment is not conducive to microbial reproduction. Extremely high concentrations of salt can even kill microorganisms in the food. The ancients certainly didn't know this, but they did know that salted food can be preserved for a long time. The use of salt as a preservative can be traced to ancient Sweden. At first, hunting was the principal means of livelihood. In this case, meat supplies were unlikely to be frequent. What's more, Fewer animals were available for hunting. In order to ensure the supply of meat, many families in Sweden began to raise animals in the surrounding forests during the summer, when the weather was suitable for animals to survive. These animals were fed every day until about 3 to 4 months later. That's in October. They were ready to be butchered for meat, and that was the only month when ancient Swedish people had fresh meat on their table. Then, with the continuous increase in productivity, people finally had some meat left. However, how to store the meat had become a headache until someone invented a whole new way to preserve food: salting. People tried to keep meat from going bad by adding some salt to it, and it could be preserved for several months and even years. There was evidence that salt was widely used to preserve meat. Historical documents in 1573 recorded the Swedish king's everyday meals, mentioning that 175 pounds of meat was consumed each year, but over 150 pounds was salty. From this, we can clearly see the importance of salt in Sweden at that time. In addition, the documents also noted the annual sales of beer in Sweden soared during that period, and this must be related to high levels of salt in their food. Now, let's turn to the sources of salt. Where is salt from? Well, salt is common in nature. It has long been found that salt can be extracted from seawater, mineral deposits, saline lakes, brine, spring, etc., among which the two most important ones are oceans and basins. On the floor of the latter often lie deserts, where traces of salt can be found, such as the Sahara. Furthermore, the quality of different salt types varies a lot. For example, salt from seawater is always mixed with impurities, so after the salt is dried, the sediments and other chemicals need to be purified before eating. However, this is not the case with salt from spring water. We can hardly find any impurities, and the salt level is much more concentrated. Then, how did people distribute salt around the world? Of course, in modern times, we have various ways of transporting goods, but in ancient times, it was not the case. Take ancient Sweden, we mentioned before, as an example. Because of the heavy use of salt in the diet, Sweden could not feed itself and had to import large amounts of salt from other countries. In order to make sure they could buy enough salt from abroad, the Swedish had to attach great importance to shipping and keep it undamaged, as it was the most crucial way at that time. While in other ancient countries, in order to distribute salt to other places, groups of men were employed. They put bags of salt on their shoulders or backs and moved them to the surrounding regions, and gradually these people were considered as a mode of transport in early times. Later, with the improvement of traffic conditions, salt trade between different regions was boosted, and long-distance food trade was also promoted, making communication between different cultures more frequent and...
That is the end of part 4.